Team 6K, this is Undead, and today we're going to be talking about Solfachords. So there was a poll, Solfachords came second, World Chalice came first. I already did a World Chalice video, but since so many people voted for Solfachords, I'm still doing the Solfachord video. If you want to be involved in the next poll, or you just want to know exactly when our videos come out, then go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell. Before we get into the video though, be sure to go ahead and check out that World Chalice video if you're interested in learning how to play World Chalice in its current form post-ban list. But yeah, the Solfachord archetype. In case you don't know this yet about the archetype, all of the main deck monsters are named after notes, musical notes. So there's Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, and Do again as level 8. We're not playing all of them, but technically speaking all of them are worth considering to play. We will talk about all of them. Maybe you could put it in your deck. Your deck doesn't have to be just the same as mine. The deck I'm showing you is mainly here to show you the overall game plan of the deck. To understand the deck's game plan in general, I'm just going to go over the starters first, basically. So this deck has 7 starters, that being 3 Solfachord Elegance, which is a normal spell that allows you to activate one of these 3 effects. You either place a Solfachord Pendulum from your deck into your Pendulum Zone, or send a Solfachord from hand to face up extra deck to get 2 Solfachords to both of your Pendulum Zones, or you basically put both of your Solfachord Pendulum Scales to the extra deck to draw 2 cards. Generally speaking, we're going to use that second effect to put a Solfachord from my hand into the extra deck to put 2 Solfachords in the Pendulum Zones, setting up our scales with basically just 1.5 cards. The scales themselves have one of 2 effects. Either the pendulum summons of Solfachord pendulum monsters cannot be negated, or your opponent cannot activate spell trap card or monster effects when your Solfachord pendulum monsters are pendulum summoned. So the odd ones have that one that says your opponent can't activate when they're summoned, and the even scales say that your opponent can't negate your pendulum summon. So that's just the first starter. You know, it's technically speaking not the best starter in the deck. However, this card is designed to set up your scales. But the other starter in the deck, the Solfachord Cutia, a level 1 with an 8 scale. And the main important effect here is if it is normal or special summoned, you search your deck for a Solfachord Pendulum monster except for another copy of itself. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to use it in conjunction with the United Pendulum skill. At the beginning of the duel, you add Pendulum Zones to your field, and the following effect can only be used once per duel. Select a Pendulum monster you control and place it in your Pendulum Zone, then select a Pendulum monster in your deck with the same original type as that monster but with a different original name and place it in your Pendulum Zone. Then negate both cards' effects until the end of the turn. The turn you activate this skill, you can only special summon from your extra deck once, except for Pendulum summons, and the skill can only be used or applied if at the start of the duel, at least half of the cards in your main deck are Pendulum monsters with the same type. More than half of our deck has to be Pendulum monsters of the same type. Thankfully, we are just slightly above half with that. And also got to keep in mind that if we do use that skill, then a Pendulum scale effects that will protect our Pendulum summon will be negated. So we're still going to be negatable, and the opponent will still be able to activate cards and effects when we Pendulum summon. But that's perfectly fine because, you know, this card, just summon it, search for something, and then you got both your scales because of the skill. Because it is the highest scale in the deck, that being the scale 8, we're going to be putting a low scale on the other side of it. We got a bunch of low scales we can choose from. We have both of our boss monsters, that being T Solfachord Butia and De Solfachord Coolia, both of which are kind of interruptions but in a really weird way. The low scale I usually put is La Solfachord Angelia. Being a scale 3, the only reason I put it there is so that I can have access to my boss monsters without having to worry about the fact that they are in the scales already. But those boss monsters effects, De Solfachord Coolia, this is the scale 1. So the lowest scale in the deck with the highest level, the opposite of De Solfachord Cutia, which is the lowest level and the highest scale. You can special summon this card from your hand by attributing to Pendulum monsters. Of course, it being a level 8, it means we can't generally Pendulum summon this in this deck because our highest Pendulum scale is 8, and as you know, you can't Pendulum summon monsters of the same level as your scales. They have to be in between the levels of your scales. It'll still special summon itself by attributing a couple of pendulums, and then you can only use the following effects once per turn. The first effect, Ignition effect. You can target one face-up card your opponent controls, or up to 2 cards if you have an odd pendulum scale in your Pendulum Zone. Negate its effects until the end of your opponent's turn. So you might notice there that you have an effect, but you also get a bonus effect if certain scale conditions are met. And the scale conditions are pretty much always going to be met in this deck because we're always going to have an even scale being Cutia and an odd scale pretty much always being Angelia. So being able to negate 2 of your opponent's cards until the end of their next turn is fantastic. Not only are you negating them right now so you can go through with the rest of your plays, but also if they can follow up with those cards are still going to be negated. And then that other effect is the interruptive effect. When an effect of a monster on the field is activated with an equal or lower attack than the highest pendulum scale in your pendulum zone times 300, you can destroy that monster. So it doesn't target, but it's a bit weird. You know, what exactly does that mean to have an equal or lower attack than the highest pendulum scale in your pendulum zone? So the highest pendulum scale in our deck is Cutia, and the deck's function is to always put Cutia in the scale. We need Cutia 120% of the time, so it's always going to be in the scale. So it being a scale 8, we times 8 by 300, that is 2400. So basically what Coolia says is if a monster with 2400 or less attack activates its effect, Coolia can destroy it. And that can be pretty relevant. Some monsters that come to mind that this would impact are Red Rising Dragon. You destroy it with a Coolia and they can't do their combo anymore. And you can kind of look at every deck and look at any monster that has 2400 or less attack and see that Coolia would be good against it. It's not the best interruption in the world because it doesn't negate something, it just destroys something when it's activating. Very annoying, but you know, it's better than nothing, and it's not the only interruption the deck can put out. The other somewhat interruption in the deck, it's not really an interruption, but it kind of helps, is Solfachord Beautia. You can quick effect target an effect monster your opponent controls, or if you have an even pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, you can target a face-up spell trap your opponent controls this turn, banish it when it leaves the field. Usually you're just targeting a card on the field, and then if you get rid of it or if they use it as material, then it will be banished instead of going to the graveyard. So it's not really interrupting their play. However, you could be annoying them by sending something to their banish when they want it to be in the graveyard. You can only use that effect once per turn. Also once per turn at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a monster with an equal or higher attack than the lowest pendulum scale in your pendulum zone times 300, destroy that monster. So equal or higher, that's a lot better than equal or lower. So the lowest pendulum scale could be the Coolia with just the 300. That means that they just have 300 or more attack. But usually we're going to have Angelia there, so it's going to be 900. Higher than 900 though, that's really not a difficult thing to come across. Generally that can actually be pretty nice, because if the opponent has a really big monster, we can attack into them with Beautia, and Beautia will just destroy that monster. So those are the boss monsters. Obviously Beautia can be pendulum summoned, but Coolia can't be pendulum summoned. That's okay, we're kind of not even planning on pendulum summoning those two monsters anyway. We're actually planning on special summoning them from the deck using Solfachord Angelia. This one has a couple of good effects. While you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Solfachord monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell traps or effects until the damage step. So if the opponent has annoying back row, you attack with Angelia, or you can just have Angelia on the field and any of your other Solfachords can attack, and they can't activate that back row when you attack. But the main effect here is during your main phase, you contribute a Solfachord pendulum monster, even if face down, and if you do, special summon a Solfachord pendulum monster from your deck whose pendulum scale is 2 higher or 2 lower than that monster, except for another copy of itself. And the thing about Angelia is that it is itself a scale 3. So if you pendulum summon this, then use its own effect tributing itself, you would go 2 lower on the scales to summon a Coolia from the deck. So you don't even need to pendulum summon Coolia, you'll just summon it from the deck with Angelia. If you happen to have a Solfachord Gracia on the field, which is a scale 4, you could tribute that to summon the Beautia, which is also 2 scales lower. But speaking of Gracia though, Gracia has the kind of opposite effect of Angelia, that if you have an even pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Solfachord pendulum monster attacks, your opponent cannot activate monster effects until the end of the damage step. So when you attack, Angelia turns off back row, and when you attack, Gracia turns off monsters like Kite Word and things like that. But also if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Solfachord spell trap from deck to hand. So that could be the Solfachord Elegance that we mentioned before, but the main things that we're going to be going for is Solfachord Musica if we go first, and Solfachord Harmonia if we go second. So if we go first, this card has 3 effects, but realistically the only effect we care about is the third one, that if you control an even and an odd Solfachord card, you can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. That's also kind of nice in conjunction with Solfachord Butia, because you can target a card with Musica, then chain your Solfachord Butia to say that when that card leaves the field this turn it's banished instead, so it would mean that the card destroyed with Musica will be banished. So regardless, Musica is going to be an interruption, but if you have Butia, then it'll be a banishing interruption. And then if you're going second, we have Solfachord Harmonia. This one has 3 effects, every one of them is very good. It's a face-up field spell. At the first effect, you can add a face-up Solfachord Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. Nice little bit of recursion there. The second effect is you can increase the pendulum scale of a Solfachord card in your pendulum zone by its level this turn. So every single one of the Solfachords, if you add their scale to their level, they will equal 9. So whatever you target with this, you're going to be making it a scale 9. We're usually going to be targeting Solfachord Cutia because it's already the high scale. We don't want to have 2 high scales on the field. And that effect to make it a scale 9 actually helps to fuel the third effect. If you control Solfachord Pendulum monster cards with at least 3 different even pendulum scales or at least 3 different odd pendulum scales, you destroy a card your opponent controls. So if you've got 3 odds, you destroy a card. If you've got 3 evens, you destroy a card. Sometimes you have two odds, you need another odd, so you use that second effect of the field spell to make your Cutia a scale 9, then you have 3 odds and you can pop a card. And that's why it's good going second, because you can pop a card and go in for game, and of course going first you go for the Musica so you can pop a card during their turn. To be real with you, we don't actually go into the extra deck that much, so you can kind of play whatever you want. I would recommend at least playing Nightmare Unicorn to help get rid of things that your deck inherently has a little bit of an issue getting over. You can really play whatever back row options you want in this deck. You can even play whatever ratios you like. I feel like Compulsory is the best option for this deck. By the way, I got a prismatic one in the box today, hell yeah. Other Solfachord options you could play: for Solfachord Fancier, the level 4, while you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if your Solfachord Pendulum monster would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy this card instead. And during your main phase, you can add a Solfachord Pendulum monster from your deck to your extra deck face up, except for another copy of itself. So it kind of fuels your extra deck a little bit, makes it easier for your pendulum summon to go off. The reason I don't play it is it isn't good unless we have Elegance, because normally we want to be summoning Cutia. If we have at it and Cutia, then we pendulum summon this, and then we add something to our extra deck. Oh, well, cool, but we already pendulum summoned, so it doesn't matter. We have to have it with this, and for that reason, I don't really feel like playing it in the deck. It's not better than the rest of them in my opinion. Another option you could definitely play is Solfachord Dreamia, and when you have an odd pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, if a Solfachord Pendulum monster you control would be destroyed by our opponent's card effect, you can destroy this card instead of one of those cards. And if you control a Solfachord card in your pendulum zone, you can special summon this card from your hand. What's kind of nice about this is that it special summons itself without requiring the pendulum summon. So it could be kind of nice to help you go into link plays before you even do the pendulum summon. And then the last one is Mi Solfachord Elatia, and if you have an even pendulum scale in your pendulum zone, you take no damage from battles involving your Solfachord pendulum monsters. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you can target a spell trap your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So a little bit of back row disruption, not really all that needed in this deck, but definitely you can play it if you feel like you need it. But it's a lot easier to understand the deck's game plan if we get into a combo tutorial, so let's just go ahead and do that, shall we? So the deck does have a couple of hard combos that you do at the beginning of the game. Well, not really combos, but plays, starting plays. The first starting play is you want to have a Solfachord Cutia. You want to have either that or Solfachord Elegant. So in this hand we have both. Fantastic. Whichever one you use is dependent on pretty much whether or not you're going first or second. If you're going second, you might prefer to use Elegance because it doesn't negate the scales that you're putting in the pendulum scales. It'll help you to play through your opponent's board. But for card advantage reasons, you might prefer to use Cutia going first, because it doesn't really matter that your scales are being negated if your opponent's not responding to them anyway. They don't have any cards on the field to respond to them with. So since we're going first, of course, going to normal summon that Cutia. Activate its on summon effect to search for a Solfachord. The Solfachords we're generally going to be searching for are either Angelia or Gracia, depending on which one we have. We want to have both of them in our hand. If we have one, we of course search for the other, but if we have neither of them, you're going to have to make the tough choice of Angelia or Gracia, and that decision is going to be based on which interruption you want. You're going to search for Angelia if you want Kulia to be your interruption, and you're going to search Gracia if you're going to want Musica to be your interruption. In this situation, we already have both, so it's not that big of a deal, and in the situation that you already have both, you're usually going to search for Solfachord Butia. What you'll do now is you're going to use the broken skill United Pendulums, turn your Cutia into a scale, and then put Angelia or Coolia in your scale. I always put Angelia because I like to have access to my Coolia, so I'm going to put that Angelia there. Then I'm going to have my scales active. I can Pendulum Summon. And then on summon, Gracia will activate its effect to search for a back row. If we're going second, we go for Harmonia, and if we're going first, we go for Musica. So I'm going to grab that Musica. Then we can use the effect of Angelica to tribute itself the majority of the time to summon a Solfachord Coolia as an interruption, and we can set Musica, and we will have 2 interruptions on our field, as well as a card that can sometimes be an interruption depending on the situation. Like if the opponent wants to use something as extra deck material, we can target it before we anticipate that they're going to be used as extra deck material. So when it is used as extra deck material, except for an Xyz summon, then it will be banished instead of going to the grave, so it won't get any beneficial usage in the grave. So that's generally our turn 1 play if all goes well, that being a Coolia for interruption, a Musica for interruption, and of course if you could only do the Angelia or the Gracia, you're going to have to choose between the Musica or the Coolia. It's up to you depending on the situation, which you feel would be better. I'm going second this time. Of course I do have both, and like I said, if you're going second, you usually prefer to use Elegance to help you play through things, but having the Cutia and the Elegance doesn't hurt either. I'm just going to pretend that I don't have Elegance and I just have Cutia here, so I'm going to use Cutia, and in this situation I'm going second, right, and I have to choose between Angelia and Gracia. It's going to be a difficult situation either way, because regardless of whichever one you pick, you're not going to have the other one. So here I'm considering, should I go for the Gracia to help me get my field spell since I'm going second, or should I get the Angelia to help me get my boss monster? And most of the time I choose to go for Gracia. I'll activate the skill here, put it there, and an Angelia, so my scales are set up, and then I can Pendulum Summon, go for a Gracia. I happen to be going second in this combo. This section of the video is more of showing what you can do if you have to choose between Angelia or Gracia. So of course going second, right, I could get the Harmonia right now, potentially pop the opponent's card. However, I have a scale 3, a scale 4, and a scale 8. I wouldn't be able to have 3 odds or 3 evens. So because I can't win this turn, I'll go for the Musica anyway. And then here I have 2 back row. And of course, you know, the less monster heavy your hand is, the more likely you're going to have your back row, right? Because that card in the hand that would have been a monster is a back row. And if I attack, he can't activate anything like Kite Rod or anything like that. So, you know, I'm pretty well set up, even though my hand wasn't that amazing. Pretty much every hand you want to have either Cutia or Elegance, and if you don't have one of those, you are pretty much guaranteed that is a brick. There's no getting around that. So we do play the 1 for 1. You know, it does suck that we have to discard a monster, but we, you know, just having that extra copy of Cutia is going to be helpful. So we have 7 starters in our deck. Of course, if we don't have one of the 7, which isn't likely, we are most likely going to have one of them. But just having 6 feels weird to me, so having that 7th copy at least is going to make us that little bit more consistent than make us brick less. So it is a pretty simple game plan overall. You just need to be told what it is before you know what to do, because sometimes the cards can be kind of intimidating. You're like, man, what am I supposed to do with all of these? They give me too many options. But you know, now that you know the general game plan, now you can see the deck in action. Let's get into the gameplay, shall we? So I'm going first here against Solfachord, against 6 Samurais. You know, I've got the Cutia as the starter, so that's going to be good. The Elegance is a follow-up play, you know what I mean? So I can Pendulum Summon out my Angelia. Angelia can go into Coolia. That's because I feel like the Coolia is going to be more relevant against somebody who's playing Sogen. But anyway, I have the compulsory evacuation device. That also helps me go into that Coolia because, you know, I'm thinking to myself, I could have 2 back row, or I could have a back row and a protective monster. So, you know, instead of searching for the back row, I can have a back row that is nearly as good as that searchable back row. So that's where I am right now. The opponent's playing 6 Samurai. He summons his legendary, and I will compulsory his tuner. If he has another level 4 to summon, that's fine, because at least he's not summoning Shien. Shien's the real problem of the deck, right? So he's going to special summon a Kazan, go into Shien, the Xyz Shien that is, and set obviously a dual wield, because if 6 Samurai sets a back row, it's definitely dual wield. And he's going to pass his turn. My first play here is to negate his Xyz and his Sogen until the end of his next turn using the ignition effect of Coolia, and this forces him to respond with a dual wield. Why does he respond with a dual wield? I don't really know, but regardless, dual wielding against a Pendulum deck is really a tough thing to do. You can't really do it, because regardless they're going to be able to keep going, just because you're only returning him to their hand, you're not destroying it or anything. Since they go back to my hand, I can just put him back on the field again, you know what I mean? So I'm going to put my scale back, I'm going to normal summon Cudia to search for a Gracia, which can search a back row. Then I'm going to pendulum summon out my Angelia and the Gracia. Gracia can search for that field spell since I am about to go for a OTK play. Gracia can turn this into a scale 9, so that therefore now I can tribute to go into Beautia, use the field spell to add the Gracia back. Then I can special summon my Coolia, then the field spell, since I have a 1, a 9, and a 3 odds, then I can get rid of his Shien here and attack for game. So I'm going second here against Dark Magicians. They got the blue boy play here, so they're going to be able to draw 2 cards. Then they can use Circle, which will get them the Eternal Soul. They can discard to summon the Apprentice, which will search a Dark Magician. They pretty much got the whole play going on here. The only bad card in the deck seems to be part of Duality, because he clearly discarded it because he wants to special summon Apprentice. This is why I say don't play Duality in Dark Magicians, because you actually do want to summon that Apprentice for the exact reason he did, which is to search for Dark Magician. Anyway, so going second against Dark Magician. Dark Magician, it's actually really rough knowing when to interrupt Solfachords, because you don't know if Solfachords has the follow-up play in their hand, which they very might well have, that being the Elegance, right? So they could either banish the Cudia now, or wait for one of my bigger monsters to come out, which is why it's such an issue, because, if they banish the Cudia, I might be fine. If they banish the boss monster, I might be fine. So, that's why they're holding on to it here. So I'm going to use the Cudia, search Angelia, then I have both of them. Use the skill to get both of my scales, then I can pendulum summon Gracia and my Angelia. I already had the Musica and the Harmonia, but if I didn't have them, I would have searched for my Harmonia here. But of course, just going to search the Elegance anyway. Then I'm going to activate that Elegance, and because Elegance is threatening to destroy his Eternal Soul or his Circle, he has to pretty much get rid of it right now. Because, disrupt me however you like, I'm still going to destroy your Eternal Soul, right? Unless you get rid of that field spell, which is exactly what he's going to do. So he's going to get rid of that field spell. Angelia is going to summon Coolia. What Coolia is going to do is negate his Circle and his Soul here. That's fantastic. And then I can go into battle phase. Gracia, because I control an even pendulum scale, he can't activate a potential other illusion that he might have in his hand, so I'm going to attack into that. Attacking to his Dark Magician, Gracia will still protect the attack. And then next turn he will try to activate Eternal Soul, but it won't work because Coolia is still negating it. So he activates it, it's still negated. He activates another Circle, gets another Circle. On his end phase, I will destroy that Eternal Soul so he can't use it on my turn, and then he's just going to scoop it up. So I'm going second here. The opponent is playing Aromage, the other waifu deck other than this one. Very annoying. Gardening, if they got lower life points than you, and you attack them, then they get to special summon from the deck. However, I just wanted to show this clip because we actually hard counter this deck. So I'm going to normal summon that Cudia, of course, get the search off. Since we already have these two, we're going to search for that Beautia. Then we're going to use the skill, set up our scales, then we're going to pendulum summon. Then we can use the Gracia to search for the Musica, since we already have that field spell, but we probably would have searched for that field spell regardless with the Gracia. Then this one here is going to target this one to say that it's banished when it leaves the field this turn, so that it can't be revived by a potential Aromage trap. So we're going to attack into it, and because of Angelia and Gracia, they cannot respond to our attacks with back row or monsters. So attack into that, they're done for. then since even though we have more life points than them, they're not going to be able to activate that gardening because of Angelica. So they have less life points now. That it's going to be rough for them with their Aroma effects. He's going to use Kanaga. I'm going to chain Musica because he's going to target Musica to return it to the hand. So I'm training it to destroy Kanaga, and then I'm going to chain Butia to target Kanaga so that when it's destroyed, it's banished instead. So he can't revive it with a potential Aroma trap. Then I can attack, his back row is turned off, and it's GG's. It might be a little bit intimidating once you first look at them, but hopefully this video simplifies it for you. So let me know how you guys feel about Solfachaords. Maybe tell me who your favorite Solfachord is. If you have any questions about the deck, be sure to leave them in the comments below and I will talk to you about it. If you like the video, subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see more content. And I've been Dead from Team 6K, signing out.
I feel like the greatest, now I feel like they hate it. Now I feel like the only one and there is no debating. Man, I feel like they leaving, now I feel like they waited. Now I feel like this is the feeling before I can make it. Before I hit the stage, I just feel like I'm nauseous. Or I feel like I'm popping, or I feel like a boss is. Maybe I'm feeling off it, or I feel like I'm toxic. Maybe feeling intoxicated is the reason for all this. I wanna whip it with the top down, dog, like I'm Earth Gang. Told him, listen, wild day shine like my first name. Told me go and grab a titty boy, it's my first chain. I ain't even switch gears yet, it's the first lane. The first pain I ever felt was the worst pain. Then church came, and that feeling of hurt came. Then her name made this feeling all worth pain. She made me realize what I had felt in the first place.